What makes a rogue investigator a rogue anyway? We have so many investigators these days, so Trish Scarborough and Kaimani Jones, do they have anything in common? Thematically and mechanically, most rogues interact with enemies in some way. That could be running from the law, hunting down a target, or just simply wanting to chat someone up. And what better way to express this than the clue events we've been talking about for several weeks? Recall that we started off this series looking at the Guardian class, which had very little interest in discovering clues through any sort of investigation action. Instead, they focused on discovering clues at the scene of the crime. Survivors were much different. Clue discovering supplemented or modified investigation actions. Rogues share a lot of DNA with both classes and can be seen as a mix of both ideas. Unlike survivors, a clear majority of rogues can attempt normal investigates. Only 4 have an intellect score of less than 3, and 4 actually can investigate at base 4. So, while there are a few investigation assets that work anytime, anywhere, some more actually need an enemy around. But by and large, you're still testing intellect. But those are the assets. Today, we're going to look at 10 clue getting events, and the first 8 care about or require an enemy. Let's get into it. First, let's divide these 8 enemy related events into the same categories I proposed at the beginning: talking to an enemy, tailing an enemy, and tiptoeing around an enemy. Or, if you prefer, schmoozing, stalking, and skedaddling. These are mostly thematic, with some overlap between them, and not really mechanical in nature, although I wish they would be, so let's speculate what some future clue getting events could be. Let's start with talking to enemies. This is mostly a new archetype, given Alessandra Zorzi's appearance in The Feast of Hemlock Vale, but a silver-tongued socialite seems right in the rogue wheelhouse. Vamp is the main event here, although there of course are other events that parlay. This one is the only one in Rogue that directly gets clues, as long as you choose the intellect test. The real payoff is something like Snitch, which gets you some more clues off of any parlay. I'd like to see a few more events in this archetype, maybe something that parlays using resources for your base value, something like buttering up whoever you're talking to for some intel. A card like that would suit Jenny Barnes and Preston Fairmont well. Next, we have tailing enemies. There's a good set of investigators here already. Trish plays the sneaky spy game already, but we can throw Tony Morgan going after bounties in the mix as well. We've got 4 cards to look at here. First, Eavesdrop and Followed. They're extremely similar cards thematically, and they both get 2 clues. They just differ in how. Eavesdrop requires an unengaged enemy and simply tests intellect, and is a great way to ignore Shroud and cards that penalize investigations, like Locked Door. You're probably interested in this in the more evasion-oriented investigators, or if you can make enemies aloof from time to time. Followed is actually more of a combat-oriented card for someone like Tony, since you get a bonus for damage already on the enemy, and it's a real investigation attempt this time. Both of these cards are underplayed by the community, but you should at least give them some thought. Next, we have a few cards that are testless in nature, but still need enemies to do their thing. Kicking the Hornet's Nest is a neat way to pull an enemy out of the encounter deck if there isn't one on the board, and then you can use that enemy for some of the other cards in this video. Oh, and you get a clue and some resources too. I quite like this card when I know there's an enemy with victory points hiding in the encounter deck, and there's a turn where I don't have anything else to do. Lastly, Under Surveillance is here primarily to stop hunter enemies in their tracks, giving you a clue and some more time to deal with them. But you can certainly use it for non-elites that spawn at your location too. These cards, while all neat, are kind of a mishmash of theming. I'd like to see some more cards that encourage you to catch up to enemies yourself, but still keeping your distance, since I think Trish and Tony would both do that. Something like On the Trail, but for rogues? How about after you enter a location with an enemy, if it is not engaged with you, discover one clue? seems powerful but could be priced accordingly. My last category is tiptoeing. Here, thematically, we're looking at investigators who are doing something illicit but are escaping the crime scene without anyone noticing. We're talking about Skids O'Toole, Finn Edwards, Kaimani Jones, and Winifred Havemock. While the theming of the existing cards blurs the line between the last category and this one a bit, the inspiration should be Fox Mask, which incentivizes leaving behind a location with an enemy. There are two events that fit the bill already: Breaking and Entering and Clean Sneak. Breaking and Entering and its upgrade are some of the most powerful events in the game due to their ability to evade enemies not engaged with you, allowing for the whole team to get a quick getaway. The skill boost for the investigation is also incredible in class, since agility tends to give you a bonus of 3 to 5, making it reasonably easy to remove an obscuring fog. The card also plays into typical rogue succeed by shenanigans. Even though the card only picks up one clue, everything else about it works well in a rogue deck. Clean Sneak is also interesting because it's fast and costs 0, but it's just too expensive XP wise to see much play. It can also only get one clue, since even with several exhausted enemies, you'll need to choose different options from the list on the card. A little bit of a shame. So, what room is there for other kinds of effects thematically? We could just get clue discovery with the exact same trigger as the Fox Mask, but let's try to be more creative. We're trying to capture the idea of stealthing your way across the map with the loot. How about an event that discovers a clue at the end of the enemy phase if there are no enemies at your location, but there is at least one enemy at a connecting location? Might be something fun to engineer. Okay, so that's that for the clue events that have something to do with enemies. The last two cards are totally unrelated to each other, but definitely fit into two major archetypes in Rogue. Intel Report plays into the hands of any rogue with money to burn. A Tesla's clue is great, but for your single card in action, might as well open up your wallet and get 2 clues, or possibly even grab them from a location far away. Remote clue discovery is very powerful, and even though the price can be high, you'll solve a lot of problems not needing to backtrack through scenarios. This is a staple for Preston and for Jenny, but it sees play across the board. Finally, there's Pilfer. While all the tests we've seen so far for clues have actually been intellect tests, this one rips a page from the Mystic playbook and replaces the skill tested with agility, which is, on average, higher among the rogue investigators. However, everything else here is turned up too. You'll need to spend 4 resources, but 3 clues are at stake. The upgrade even offers an opportunity to return it to hand. Big risk, big reward. Just don't draw the autofail. Before we're done with our lovable scoundrels, you'll notice that I didn't make any mention of a few investigators at all, so let's give them a minute or two of the video. First, Safina Rousseau. While she does deal with forgeries, she's not exactly the same kind of criminal as the rest. While she can use all of the above cards just fine, since she is an event card aficionado, she might also look into her Mystic access for clue discovery. Sadly, there's not going to be a Mystic video in this series because there are just 2 clue events: Read the Signs and Drawn to the Flame, plus String of Curses if you want to count that. These are all good cards, and there's not much more to say about them. Hopefully we'll get another few in the Drowned City with Agatha Crane and Gloria Goldberg in the box. Next, Bob Jenkins doesn't really thematically fit in with the rogue class at all, other than his love of money. The Edge of the Earth investigators are tricky to categorize since they have very limited access to the level 0 cards which predominate these lists. For Bob, instead he gets full access to Survivor level 0 cards. So check out that video for more for him. And that brings us to Monterey Jack, who does have full access to level 0 Rogue. His thematic ties to Rogue are also a bit shaky, but with 4 intellect and 5 agility, and economic incentives to move about the map, he does well with all of these cards. Now, he does upgrade into Seeker cards, which can change his game a little. So, what better place to end our series than the champions of clue discovery themselves, the Seeker class? That will be a fun discussion to examine why investigators who are good at basic investigates have any need for clue events at all. I'll see you next time.